Get Noticed by the Media. This is a training that is being put on by the West Virginia Community Development Hub. And my name is Emma Pepper, and I am the Communications Director here at the Hub. And it is my job to help West Virginians understand that change is possible and that it is happening today. And so I'm really, really excited to be presenting to you today because I know that everyone in this room is making change, and I am excited to be able to help you tell your stories and get the good word out there into the world about all of the change that you are making. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to go over a couple of housekeeping items with you guys. If you have trouble at any point in time hearing the audio, try connecting through your phone instead of connecting through the computer. So the number that you will call is right here, and then you just enter this PIN number and you will be connected to the phone. And this number is also in the chat box. It's the very first chat in the chat box down at the bottom of the screen. And so you can call that number at any time to help you hear the audio if you're having problems. The chat box is the next thing that I want to tell you guys about. So if at any time you have a thought or a question, you can type that into the chat box. I do have a trusty sidekick with me today. Her name is Catherine Ryan, and she works with me here at the Hub. And just one moment, I'm taking care of a technical thing. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to tell you a little bit more about the chat box. Excuse me, I had a technical issue that I needed to attend to. So we can say hi at any time in the chat box. I'm going to go ahead and say hello to you guys, and I see Forrest has already said hi. So hello to the group, and yeah, everyone feel free to chime in and say hi. Hi, Erin. Hi, Catherine. Hey, Karen. Deanna, I'm sorry, I'm probably mispronouncing your name. Holly, Crystal, Mimi, Jolynn, Casey, Megan. Okay, wonderful. Everyone, please keep the hellos coming. I am happy to see all of your names listed here. And also, I am excited that this is confirmation that everyone can hear me okay. So just so you know, at the end of this, we are going to leave time for Q&A, but if you have a question about a technical issue at any time, please type that into the chat box, and Catherine is going to be keeping an eye on that, and she can help you out. Okay, so let's get into it. Oh, excuse me, there's one other thing I wanted to tell you about. And that is that, say you have a complete meltdown with your computer, everything fails, know that you're going to be sent a copy of the recording of this presentation at the end of the presentation, or it'll be in about 24 hours. I'm going to get an email out to you guys. And also, at that time, I'm going to be sending you a copy of the PowerPoint that I'm using to do this presentation. So if you find yourself scrambling to take notes at any point in time, don't worry, you're going to get a copy of this PowerPoint. Okay, so let's dig in. So the first thing that I want to talk to you guys about in getting your work noticed by the media is to find your people. And these are the people in the media, the journalists, editors, publishers that can be your allies in getting your story out there. And so whenever I'm thinking about finding my people, I think about three major categories of media. I think about, okay, I want to have my TV stations covered, I want to have my radio stations covered, and then I want to have any newspapers covered. And then I'm also including here the potential for online media. And I kind of toss those in with a newspapers category. And I know here in West Virginia, we are still building up our online only media presence. And so some communities may not have this, some communities may, but definitely be considerate of that when you're thinking of who are the different groups of people, the different platforms that I want to speak to when I'm creating a list of people that I want to try to get to tell my story. So there's a couple of tips and resources that I want to share with you. The first thing to think about is, let's take newspapers, for example, because this is the most common place where you'll see this happen, is who is the right person for me to talk to? So in a lot of cases at a newspaper, the right person for you to talk to is going to be an editor. And that is because the editor is the person who assigns the stories. And so even if you're talking to a journalist, the journalist who works under that editor could potentially go and pitch the story to the editor. But if you're going direct to that editor, you may have a better chance of getting your story assigned to any number of journalists working under that editor. Now, another thing to think about is if you have a very specific issue that you're working on. For example, if you're working on healthcare. Now, is there a person at the newspaper that specifically covers healthcare? If so, think about building a relationship with that person and potentially pitching your stories to them. And if you're not sure who the best person to contact is, either email or call and ask. Say, this is the kind of work that that we work on here. These are the kinds of stories that we want to tell. Who is the best person for me to talk to? Finding the right person and building a relationship with the right person is a major step to making sure that your story gets heard. If you're pitching stories and you're pitching to the person that doesn't even typically write those kinds of stories, you're never going to be able to make any headway with them. So the next thing that I want you guys to think about that I want to share with you today is the idea of building relationships. So journalists are our friends, and if we build a rapport with them, then we're likelier to get phone calls from them in the future when they're thinking of stories that may touch on our area of focus. And one tip to think about is how can you become a resource for that journalist? So say, for example, again, you're working in healthcare and a journalist is writing a story on something related to healthcare, and he or she is not aware of who they should be talking to, right? So if you establish yourself as a resource to say, hey, you can call me to talk to not only me about these matters, but I can also refer you to other people in my field, then you will be more likely to always get those calls in the future. So think about not just how can I get my name in the paper in this outlet, but who can I refer this journalist to in order to serve as a resource for them. So the next two things that I want to share with you guys are two places where you can actually find out who the journalists are in your area and find contact information for them. And the first place I want to send you guys to is the West Virginia Press Association. They are awesome. They have an entire PDF file on their website, and it has listed every single newspaper in the state of West Virginia and who the publisher is of that paper, who the editors are, what their email addresses are, what their phone numbers are. They list them by county and by town. It's just this incredible resource, and it's free to use through the West Virginia Press Association. So I definitely recommend checking them out if you're trying to locate newspapers either in your area or in another area of the state that you're trying to break into. The next resource that I want to tell you guys about to help you identify press people is the West Virginia Communications Network. So this is something that we help to facilitate here at the Hub. And one thing that I'm going to be working on this year is creating a shared statewide press list for the group. And so when you join that group, you can be made aware of that statewide press list. Oh, Chelsea, I see that Chelsea Costello has added the link to this West Virginia Press Association. She says there's a 2016 version on the Press Association site. I wonder if this is up to date. I believe they always put the most up-to-date PDF on their website. So I'm wondering if there's something funky going on in the naming. But you know what I'll do for you guys? I will, when I send that follow-up email to you here within the next 24 hours, I'll include that link to the PDF I'm referring to, just in case that's not the most recent one. I'm making a note of that. So if you want to be a part of the West Virginia Communications Network, just respond to that email that I send out in 24 hours and say, hey, I'd like to join the West Virginia Communications Network, and we will get you on there. So I want to tell you about one more thing with TV, and then we're going to move on from finding your crew and finding your people. So for most of the major TV stations in West Virginia, like let's take, for example, WCHS, which serves the Charleston area and beyond. Their email address is always news@WCHS, I think it's like TV.com. So the reason why I want to share that with you is you can always find these news@ email addresses on the major news stations across the state. And even though that's not a specific person, that is still the best email address to email. I always had felt anxious about that for a little while because I thought, well, it's just going to go into this random box and maybe nobody will ever see this email. But they actually actively have people at the TV stations checking that news@ email address for each station. So that is the best way to reach TV stations across the state. Okay, so next I want to shift into getting the word out. So you found your people, now it's time to identify some stories that those people may be interested in. So let's talk about 4 different kinds of stories that press people may be interested in. And I'm going to dig into each of these a little bit deeper, but those are bright idea stories, it's finally happening stories, human faith, that human connection stories, and stories where we want people to take action. And within each of these story types, and even beyond that, something to think about is visual moments. So anytime you have something going on in your work where you think this is going to make a great photo or this could make a great video, that's a potential time to connect with your local media. So local media is hungry for great images, great photos. They really help to make their actual platforms, the newspaper, TV, etc., look better, but they also really help on social media, which is really key for our day and age. So be thinking about when are these different story types popping up in your work, but also think about those visual moments. If you have a relationship built up with a press person, you could send them an email and say, hey, I think there's going to be a great photo opportunity coming up. Would you be interested in sending someone out to capture this? Or I can capture a photo for you. Would you be interested in running a photo if I can get a decent one to send to you? So let's dig into these 4 story types. The first one is the bright idea. And this is whenever you are putting something new into the world. So whenever I have this Lion King photo here, Simba out there into the world, it's whenever you're giving birth to something new, right? So maybe you have a new business that you're opening, or maybe there's a major new partnership that you're starting up, or maybe it's just that you have a new idea. So op-eds can fall into this category as well. If you have an idea or an issue that you want to bring to the table, speaking as an expert in your field, consider writing an op-ed about it. Even if the idea isn't directly related to the work that you currently have going on, you're still establishing yourself as a voice of authority, and that can be really pivotal in getting people to pay attention to you and take your work seriously. So next is the It's Happening story. So these are any type of special events that may be going on, a new program launches, a project happens, times when you're going to have lots of people come into the room together and you want to invite people to that really timely moment in time for you. Next is a human face, and in case you're wondering, this is my baby, and he's adorable. He's a little chunker, and his name is Adley. But this story type is all about creating that human connection. And so, do you have a star volunteer that you're working with? Is there a leader either within the staff of your team, or maybe you have someone on the board of directors, or even a leader who has emerged within the community that you're working in, or even yourself? Consider putting yourself forward or putting any of these people forward for an article, a future article about the work that they're doing. If someone is really going the extra mile, then they deserve to have that spotlight put on them in the media. Okay, moving on to our next story type, and this is the take action story. So in the take action story, that's when we're going to think about moments where we need someone to take action immediately. For example, maybe our funding has been threatened in some way, or maybe a policy has been put onto the table that could potentially harm your organization or harm your business or harm the population of people that you are serving or that are buying from you. Okay, so these are our 4 major story types. And thinking about these 4 story types and just brainstorming on what are some potential stories that I may have that map to any of these 4 story types will help to get the ball rolling and help to get you thinking about what's a moment where the press may be interested in the work that I'm doing that I haven't previously considered before. So the next thing that I want to just briefly mention to you guys is the idea of sending out a press release. So we found our people, we have a press list assembled that we want to communicate with. We've selected a story that we want the press to pay attention to. And now we're going to consider sending out a press release to those press people. And what I have here is a link for you to a template. So I'm going to point you guys to this template rather than walking through a press release step by step, because within this template, I've broken down for you the different types of information to include in each paragraph and what goes where. So I refer you to this to check out. It's a Google document, and you can make a copy of this document for your own purposes and use it at any time. So we've selected our story, and now we've sent out a press release. And something that you want to do next is always want to do press pitches. And sometimes if you know the story that you want to tell is just perfect for one press person and you really want their eyes on it, you may not even send out a press release. You may go directly to that press person and pitch your story. So let's talk about pitching. So the first thing you want to start with is selecting who you are going to pitch. And the way that you select that, those people, is do some research. So we talked before about journalists that have specific beats. They're writing on a specific topic. That may be obvious to you, but another thing to think about is what kinds of stories does this person like to write? And take a look at their past articles. So say, for example, you have a restaurant opening in your community, and you think that's really awesome and you want to shine a light on it. Well, take a look at who are the journalists in your area who are typically writing articles on new business openings or specifically on restaurant openings, and that's the person that you'll want to pitch, right, or the people. So you could go to them, either send them an email, or in smaller communities, it's even welcome to just pick up the phone and do a phone call to the outlet and say, hey, I've noticed in the past that you have written articles about new businesses opening up. There's a new business opening, and here are some things that are really exciting about it, and would you be interested in writing a story on it? So that's one way that you could frame it, assuming that you haven't sent out a press release. Another thing you can do if you did send out that press release, first of all, is select the list of people that you want to either email or call personally to follow up. And when you send that follow-up, you say, hey, did you see the press release that I sent out a couple of days ago or a week ago? I want to make sure that this is on your radar because I think that you would be really interested in this story based on this other story that you wrote in the past or based on your interest in this area, etc. Are you interested in writing something? Let me know. I typically include a question in those pitches, especially when they're over email, with the hope that someone will return my email. If the person does not return your email, don't get discouraged and don't feel like, oh, well, maybe I shouldn't email them in the future. It's just a common part of the game in pitching press people. Sometimes people don't respond to emails. There have been times that I have emailed journalists for years thinking that they just didn't care about whatever it was that I was trying to pitch to them. But I just kept at it, especially if I knew that they were the right person to talk to. And then one day, eventually, they would write me back. And they would say, hey, I'm interested in this story. Or they would talk to me in a way as if they've been reading my emails all along. So don't get discouraged if people don't write you back. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk to you guys about is you've gotten the word out, you've found the people that you want to talk to, you've selected your story, you've written that press release and made that pitch. Now let's talk about the interview. So say by chance you get that phone call and someone is interested in doing an interview with you. How do we manage that? So the first thing that you want to think about is preparation. And you'll want to think about who is the audience. Who is the audience for this publication or for this TV news station? Just think in your mind of people that you know that are typically reading that newspaper or watching that TV news show, whatever it is. Then pick 3 things that you want that audience to know. And one of those things should convey what your value is to the audience. And by value, I mean, think about the question, what would change in this person's life if they were to take part in this event or buy this product or join this program, whatever it is that you're trying to get across. And then always include a call to action. And by call to action, I mean, what is the one thing that you want people to do? Is it give us money? Is it come out to this event? And if you don't have a direct call to action like that, your call to action should be either follow us on Facebook or check out our website. And then you give information about how to either go to Facebook or to your website. And the third thing that you want to think about in preparation is thinking about the obvious questions. So what are the questions that I'm probably going to get asked in this interview, and what should my responses be? And say you get a phone call about something that's going on in your work that may have something negative attached to it. Think through those negative questions as well that may come up and how you would potentially respond to them. So let's talk next about that phone call. So say it's the time you've received a call and maybe you weren't expecting it, or maybe you're not prepared in that moment to do a press interview. So here are some tricks to delay. So you can say, hey, oh wow, thank you so much for calling. I'm really happy to talk with you. I have a meeting in 15 minutes, or I'm preparing for a big meeting that's going to be happening soon. Can I call you back? But here are the 3 things that you always, always, always want to ask in that first phone call. You want to know, what's your story? What's the exact story that you are interested in writing? What's your deadline? So this will help you with the can I call you back piece. So say, for example, they call you at 10 a.m. and their deadline is 3 p.m. that day. Say even that you will call them back in 30 minutes or whatever it is, just to give yourself some time to compose yourself. You want to make sure that you can help them meet that deadline, but also get your ducks in a row before you talk to them. And another question to always consider asking is, who else are you speaking with? So this would be for if the story isn't just specifically about you and the work that you are doing. Maybe they're just talking generally about the economy in West Virginia or something like that. And you want to know, okay, that's great. I'd be happy to be interviewed, but who else are you speaking with? And the third thing I want you guys to think about, just in general throughout this whole process of talking to press people, is always be timely. So be mindful of those deadlines. If you get an email, respond to the email as soon as possible, and be friendly. So journalists are our friends. Sometimes I mention about the potential for negative in these stories, and it can, we can put ourselves into a position where we're worried about getting that call, right? But building that positive relationship with a journalist and recognizing that they're just doing their job is something that can be really helpful to us in being pictured in or portrayed in a more favorable light, even if there's something negative going on. But just in general, being friendly is a great way to build that positive rapport with the journalist, so you'll be likelier to get phone calls in the future. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you guys about is during that interview. And I want to give you some permission slips here. And those permission slips are, it's okay if you're talking to a journalist and they are going down a path where they have either been given or researched incorrect information, or they are making some assumptions that are not based in reality of the situation or in truth. It's okay to diplomatically point out to them the path they are going down is the incorrect path. It's okay to take a moment to pause and think. Now, this is something that you need to be mindful of when you're on the video. You don't want to pause for too long if that TV station, they have a video camera in your face, especially if you're on live TV. But it's okay to take a breath, to pause, to think about the response that you want to give so you can be sure that you are giving the kind of answer that you feel confident in. The next thing I want to share is that it's okay to not know the answer to a question. So you can either refer that journalist to a person who does know the answer to the question, or you can offer to follow up by email. So if a question comes up and you don't know the answer to it, you can just say, hey, I'm not sure. I have to do a little bit of research in order to find the answer to that question. Is it okay if I follow up with you by email? I'll be sure to meet your deadline. And the next thing that I want you guys to think about is that it's okay to say what you want to say. So you're going to be going into this with your preparation when you're thinking about these 3 things that you want the audience to know about. Make sure to include those 3 things in your responses. Even if you are getting away from the exact question a little bit, try to think about how to weave those into your response, but also think about how you can be proactive to the questions that you're being given, not just reactive to those questions. So at the end of your interview, ask when the piece will run. So that should be the very final thing that you ask. Hey, when is this story going to come out in the paper? Or what time will this story be on the news? Or which episode of this radio show am I going to be a part of? Always ask when the piece will run so you will know when to check for it. Okay, so after the interview, think about sending a note out to that reporter thanking them for their time. So this is another one of those relationship building tools, right? Just say, thanks so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And this is a good time to also include any additional information. So say that you forgot to include something really important in that interview that you really want to make sure is out there. You can include it in that follow-up thank you note and ask that it be included in the story. After the interview is also when you're going to follow up on any of those items that you promised to send if you didn't know the answer to a question. And it's also the time to either set up a Google alert that's going to make sure that you get an email when that story is published, or to set up a reminder on your calendar. So say, for example, you know that story is going to be published in the Sunday paper, put a reminder on Sunday in your calendar so you can know to go back and check for that article. Okay. You guys, that is my presentation on getting your work noticed by the media. And now I want to open it up to questions and answer time with you guys. And we're going to handle question and answer through the chat box. So any questions that you may have, go ahead and start typing those into the chat box. And as you do that, I want to let you know about the survey that we have going on. And this is a very, very brief survey. And I'm going to put the link to it in the chat box again. This presentation came about because I did a training at the Social Enterprise Summit that Coalfield Development Corporation put on. And I asked this group of people in the room, what do you want to learn about? What is keeping you up at night when it comes to marketing and communications? And this presentation and the one that's coming up soon about the 30-minute marketing strategy, those both came about in response to what those people said. So I wanted to open up those questions to a larger group of people. You guys, please take a look at this survey and let me know what's keeping you up at night. I am not only looking at these responses, but I'm also distributing the results of this survey to service providers and trainers across the state who also provide marketing and communications training. Okay, I have a question here from Ruthanna. She says, is it appropriate to send an attached PDF of a press release, or should I type it out in the email, or both? I like to do both. So I include that text in the body of the email, and then I also attach a PDF version. And that just allows for the opportunity for the press person to manage that press release in however they prefer. The reason why I like to include the text in the body of the email is because it's easier to copy and paste that way than it is to copy and paste from a PDF file. Holly Hinkle says, any thoughts on approaching blogs to get a product out there? This could pertain to blogs, also to social media influencers, which are really big right now. I think it depends on the reputation of the person that's either the social media influencer or of the blog itself and what their reach is. So you'll want to think about, say for example, you want to send a sample product out to a blog. And that sample product is going to cost you X amount of dollars. Now think about how many people that blog or that platform is potentially reaching. Now, if they are going to cover you, is it worth the investment of you sending that product out to them? Erin Becker says, do you attach an image as well? Yeah, go ahead and attach an image. And when you're thinking about attaching an image, attach a high resolution image. Another thing you could include, if you are concerned that the high resolution images that you have, so a good rule of thumb is if your image is 1 megabyte or larger in file size, it's probably a high enough resolution. But if you don't want to send out a bunch of really large emails, or if you're sending out your press release through a service like MailChimp or Constant Contact, then what you can do is you can say in that email, high resolution images available upon request. Okay, I need to scroll up. Jennifer says, you mentioned components of catchy stories. Wondering if you have recommendations regarding the arch of a good story. Where do you start and end? What's in the middle? Good length for stories told in person versus written stories or videos. Lots of questions as we explore telling our story better. Yeah, so first of all, I think, yeah, you have a lot of questions in there. So my email is up here on the screen. So go ahead and send me an email and we can chat more. I can tell you that just in general, shorter videos are better at this point in time. Good length for stories told in person. It really depends on the story that you're telling. But one other thing I want to point out to the whole group as it pertains to this question is think about telling your story from the middle, right? So we often think about once we're crossing that finish line, that's when we want to tell our story, right? And I'll give you an example of one of the most popular blog posts that we had on our Hub blog here. And it was about a group that submitted a grant proposal and was waiting to hear whether or not they got the grant. Now, you would think that we would wait to tell that story when they actually got the grant. But people are interested in those in-progress stories, and journalists can be interested in them too, especially when there's a photo opportunity or a video opportunity tied to it. Tess, you're asking, how can a blog benefit my organization? Now, this is something that I would encourage you to put in that what keeps you up at night survey. I would go and answer that because that talking about blogs and the benefit is a whole world of thought, and it could be an entire other training. But you're also welcome to email me. Anyone here today is welcome to send me an email with their question. Catherine says, here's one that got missed. Thank you, Catherine. What do you do if the story is either not published or shown? So once we give a story to a journalist, it is out of our hands. We don't have control over whether or not that story actually will run. So it's rare that if a journalist promises you that a story will run, that it then doesn't get run. But that's why it's really handy to have that question when you say, when will this story run, right? Because if the story does not then appear after they say it will, you can email that journalist and say, hey, I noticed that the story didn't run. Is there a reason for that? Is it going to run in the future? And if for some reason your story is not going to run, take it to another journalist and try to have it published elsewhere. Rachel says, how can I stop feeling anxiety from pitching a story via the phone? I get the worst anxiety because I feel like a huge bother to reporters. Is that a misconception on my part? How can this process be less awkward? That is a misconception. Pitching is one of the main ways that reporters get the stories that they end up telling. Now, something to be cognizant of is that research part that we talked about. So what kind of research are you doing in advance to make sure that this reporter is the right reporter to talk to? Are they typically writing stories about this subject? That can be one way to open the conversation, to say, hey, I noticed that you wrote a story on X. I think you may be interested in this story on Y because of that. But overall, you are not a huge bother to reporters. Like I said, there have been times when I have been emailed reporters for years, and this is really more when I worked in a larger market, Washington, D.C., but I emailed that reporter for years, and they never wrote me back. And then finally, they would write me back. So don't feel like you're being a pest. Emily says, missed a portion of the presentation due to internet connection issues. That's such a bummer, but that's okay. You're going to get a recording. You mentioned at the beginning about sending press releases to the news at addresses. I have had little to no success with these addresses. Should I still keep sending press releases to these email addresses? Yeah, so sometimes we can send a press release out there into the ether and feel like we're never getting a response, right? And that's when I would follow up with a phone call. So say, for example, again, WCHS, you send them a press release about an upcoming event, right? You can call the newsroom and say, hey, did anyone see the press release that I sent out, and are you planning to send a news crew out to the event? And that's something that you can do. Excuse me, let me take a drink of water. That's something that you can do a couple of days before the event, and you can even call them back on the morning of the event and say, hey, this event is happening today. Are you still planning to send someone, or are you planning to send someone? Sometimes if you didn't get a response in the beginning, but then you end up calling on a slow news day, TV crews will come out anyway. Okay, Catherine says, timing-wise, how far out before an event should you reach out to the press? Weeks before, days before? It depends on the publication and on the timing of the publication is the biggest thing. And this is where building that relationship with the reporter will really help you. So say, for example, you're trying to build that human connection and you're pitching a story about a person to a features editor at a newspaper. Well, maybe that newspaper or that the section where that story would belong only comes out on Sundays. Well, you want to make sure that you know the deadline of that editor in advance. When do they typically have their stories by in order for them to go to print and be ready for Sunday? And then time your pitch or your press release with that. When it comes to just like general timing, I think about doing, like, say, for example, you have an event. That's what Catherine's question is referring to. I think about like maybe 2 to 3 weeks in advance. So you want to have a little bit of time out from that event, but not too far out where once you're getting closer to the event, they will have forgotten that they already received that press release. Here's Emily saying, Catherine, I know I have a radio contact that requires at least 3 weeks advance due to recording times. Hope that helps. So yeah, again, that is that building that relationship. So Emily has built a relationship with that person on the radio and knows what their preferred scheduling is. Okay, you guys, do we have any remaining questions from the group on these topics? Okay, I'm not seeing any additional, it tells me when people are typing. I think everyone can see that. Holly Hinkle is typing now. She says thank you. And thank you to everyone who has said thank you. I really appreciated spending this time with you today. You have my email address, e.pepper@wvhub.org. You are welcome to email me, and I will be emailing you within the next 24 hours with this PowerPoint presentation and a link to the recording. And thank you for spending this lunch hour with me, and enjoy the rest of your day.